Hello, my name is Michael Christie, Artistic and Music Director of Southern California's New West Symphony. Welcome to Program Insights for America, the Melting Pot edition of New West's Global Sounds Local Cultures season. Lara Downes is on the forefront of the American music scene, a trailblazer both on and off the stage, charting a musical roadmap inspired by the legacies of history, family, and collective memory. As a chart-topping recording artist, a powerfully charismatic performer, a curator, and a tastemaker, Lara is recognized as a cultural visionary on the national art scene. Lara partners with the prominent composers of our day and a wide array of artists spanning all genres. Lara is also the host of National Public Radio's Amplify. Lara, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
It's great to be here.
In a piece you wrote for NPR, you wrote, when Duke Ellington famously coined the phrase beyond category, he was talking about freedom of choice, of expression of belonging. He meant following your heart and your instincts into an artistic territory without borders. Following your heart has brought you to some amazing places. Take us on your journey.
I think it was learning to follow my heart, you know? I think that quote is in my head every day. I think all of Duke Ellington's quotes are in my head every day. He said some good stuff. But, you know, we talk a lot, I think, about authenticity and finding your voice, and that's not so easy to do, especially, quite honestly, in our world where we have this tradition behind us, you know, and so much of our training is devoted to that tradition, and you have to remember to look at yourself and listen to yourself. And I remember really clearly when that kicked in and set me on my journey, and it had a lot to do with identity, understanding myself, understanding where I fit in my world, in my music, in my country, you know, in my community, and then just realizing that there are so many stories to tell, and I think that music is such an amazing way to tell stories.
One of our local politicians recently said, instead of asking somebody where you're from, she said, ask them what their story is. And I think in today's atmosphere, where we are not only dealing with so many tragedies and so many changes, but we're looking at emerging from the COVID pandemic, what's the story that you hope to help tell as we transition back to more live experiences, coming through what we've all gone through together?
You know, I think the thing about stories is that they have common threads, right? We have our lives on this planet that have these prescribed milestones, and we all share that, and it's so easy to forget that in looking at the minutia, right? This year, we all went through this together in this very strange way because we were so separated, and yet we were living the same reality every single day. And I think that has transformed us, I really do, and it's made us understand our connection and value our connection. I hope that that's true. I hope that we hold on to that.
Especially during the pandemic, diversity and representation in classical music has been elevated, and you play a critical role in that elevation. What do you imagine happening as we return to the concert hall, as we come up against those traditions, as we bravely embrace the people that we are, the country that we come from, the influences that we bring to bear?
I keep having my doubts about whether we can, and then I remind myself that we haven't been here before, that this is new. I really think that this attempt to really listen to each other's stories and to give voice to each other and to honor each other's stories, I don't think we've done this before. And I think that the moment we start to do it, we see the beauty, you know? It's so much more rich, and it pulls us all in. We can all find our place. I think that the problem that we have faced in classical music and concert music is that so many people feel outside of it, right? So many listeners, audiences, young musicians, and there are reasons for that. And if we can break that down and welcome everybody in, I think it immediately transforms itself into a much more interesting place to be.
And I suppose the connection between the online environment and our live environment, boy, these things are indelibly linked now.
Yeah.
They are connected.
Yes.
So what is your plan as you go forward? Because you are a busy concert pianist, you are a nationally broadcast personality, you are a researcher, you're a curator. How are you going to balance all that?
I don't know. Ask me a year from now. But I think that the one thing I want to hold on to every day in all of those activities is that you don't know who's listening. That's what I've loved about this year. You know, we put our work on the internet. We're speaking to the whole world. And I think that from now on, when I walk into a hall, I will know that what I do in that hall, yes, it's everyone who's sitting there physically, and it's everyone else. You know, it's everyone who's connected to everyone who's sitting here physically. Right. It's kind of like a galaxy shift or something.
Yeah. Do you welcome the fact that people outside of that space will see what happens in the moment? And I ask that because in the controlled environment that we've been in this year, where we can edit and we can record and we can pick, that's given us a tremendous amount of control over what people hear, how they hear, and the message that we send. When we go into live streams, when we go into the other things that enable us to bring a live audience in. How do you feel our industry is going to deal with that sense of exposure, in a sense?
But I think we've all been so vulnerable. And I remember really clearly the moment that I had to let go of sort of perfection or even assumptions about what was going to happen. One of the first things I had to do after everything shut down, I was supposed to go in early April to DC to film a Tiny Desk concert. And I had it absolutely programmed in my mind. I knew exactly what it was going to be. I'd spent so much time on it. We had planned every moment. And then, we held on, and then finally I got the call, you got to do this from home. And I remember sitting in my living room and just being so frustrated because I couldn't do that thing. Obviously, I couldn't do that thing. If I was going to try to do that thing, it was going to be very bad and awkward and weird. And I had to just let that go away and do this thing.
Right.
And I've loved that this year because the only thing I don't like about this environment is any kind of wall that's between us. When you're just in your living room and you're just being you, I mean, I've done some very messy things this year on camera. I think I've really valued the intimacy and the authenticity and the vulnerability, and I think my whole NPR show is about that. Yeah. And I think, I don't know, I think that as musicians we're more willing to show our true selves instead of the self that just, exists on the way from the dressing room to the stage and back again.
Yeah, I think we've been talking about that a lot. Mm-hmm. How can we let people know more about the rehearsal process, about the creative decisions that are being made? So yes, I also welcome that access because you're right. You don't know who's out there. You don't know who's going to say, oh, I see, if I am allowed to be creative. Yeah. I am allowed to make a decision in Beethoven or Bach just as much as in Ellington. One memory I have of hearing your voice on the radio has been learning more about various composers that have just sparked this interest for you. So I wonder what it looks like in your research environment. Do you just have a stack of music that you need to go through? Do you make time to play scores that have never been played? Are people referring things to you? Tell us about that background that eventually gives us the shows that we hear.
Yeah, well, I mean, for one thing, there's nothing more thrilling than trying out a manuscript that's been sitting in an archive for decades and kind of just feeling yourself bring it back to life. That's something truly staggering. The other thing is that I'm discovering a community. I have people writing to me who have been doing this research sort of on an amateur basis. And they have lists of composers that they've been compiling. I don't even, know with what outcome in mind, and they want to share. And so everything is blossoming and kind of exponentially growing. And, now the spreadsheet is like pages long. But that's the thing, too. That's the big discovery. And I'm trying not to use the word discovery because all this stuff was there. I'm not discovering anything. But like inner discovery is there's so much of this music. And that also changes what we think we know because as we've got this body of work, we've got this canon. And then anything that we find outside of that tends to come with a story of, like, this was the one and this was the only, right? She was the first, he was the only. And then we think it's still this, and there are these isolated figures who pop up. But no, when you get into the world of music by composers of color, for example, it's a tradition. It's a lineage, it's a legacy, it's like connection and collaboration and teaching and passing on of things. And then you just see American music and concert music as a different thing.
I think that's a great segue into the Florence Price Concerto because when I hear the three parts, it's written as a concerto in one movement, but there are three movements basically. I can easily imagine any Germanic piano concerto. It's just that when we get to the second movement, suddenly you hear themes that are reminiscent of our early 20th century, late 19th century culture, our culture. And then certainly when you hear the third movement, we'll call it the third movement, the Allegro, it is just as much of a folk inspired dance as you would hear in the Schumann concerto or the Grieg concerto or any of these other pieces. And I think I can't wait for people to hear this piece because as soon as they realize that it has the skeletal structure but just a different DNA, they're just going to be blown away by it. So what's your feeling about Florence Price's concerto?
What I love, we were talking about authenticity. when you think about her life and her career, she's trying to make a life in music as such an outsider, right? She's trying to be performed by the Boston Symphony. She's trying to enter into this world, which at that time was very white and very European and very male. She had the choice to write all three movements of that concerto as strictly romantic, European, virtuoso, standard, right? She didn't. Right. She let herself shine through. And I think it's a very bold choice, and it's also, I can't decide if it's intentional or if it's something she couldn't help but do.
When you hear her other pieces, though, I think it's she couldn't help it. Which is great, but at the same time, such a master of the instrument. What is it like to play pianistically? I think it must just fit right in the hand.
It fits right in the hand. And then, of course, I think about Florence Price, and I also think about Margaret Bonds, who played that piece for the first time, who is also this brilliant composer. And I think about these women. You called me a trailblazer. I'm not a trailblazer. Those were trailblazers, to take everything that was available in that moment. And remember, it's the Chicago Black Renaissance, so there is this coming together of brilliant minds from all over the country, and they're collaborating and they're sort of escalating everything for each other. But to do so much with that time. And then I feel like, we look back at, it's almost 100 years ago. It's just about 100 years ago. And then what happened in the meantime? Why did the music get lost? Why did those stories get lost? Bringing everything full circle now.
Yeah.
Eubie Blake wrote the show Shuffle Along, the first all-black hit show on Broadway. It opened in 1921, 100 years ago exactly. Langston Hughes called it the beginning of the Harlem Renaissance. There's something, I don't know, I'm a little superstitious or something, but here we are, exactly 100 years later, and reimagining that piece. If you listen to the original cast recording, it's like a, jazz hands bottle. I really wanted to honor the side of him that also had roots in the classical tradition, that probably wanted to stay more in the classical tradition and it wasn't possible, and just to let the beauty of the melody and the intention come through. So it's, as you said, it's a moment to just, grab onto this stuff.
We are so lucky that we have YouTube videos available of Eubie Blake, which I think it's a little haunting actually to watch, because it feels like 1921 is so long ago.
Yeah.
And of course these performances are much later in the 20th century, but still to have that connection. And he's so modest. He says, I'll try to sing this, I'll try to play this, and the audience goes crazy, and then they get very quiet, and then he just goes for it, and you think, what do you mean? Try what?
Yeah.
It's just amazing. So I was so inspired to know that we have a record of what that talent is. And the same is for Duke Ellington.
Right.
We have not only the commercial recordings, but we do have just the ad hoc recordings capturing the things that happened with the people he was playing with. So does that give you more, having those links, does that give you more maybe license to explore their works in different ways because they were doing that themselves?
Yes. Do you know, I'm sure you've seen this, there's this YouTube clip, I think it's 1965, It's Bernstein and Ellington, and they're sitting in there basically having the conversation we're having now, really. They're talking about how different kinds of music are coming together, how jazz is entering the concert hall, how audiences are becoming more diverse. That's a long time ago. This conversation continues, and I feel like that's what we're doing. You know, we're continuing work. We're not pioneering anything. We're taking it further, which is what we're supposed to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So these people, I think, Leonard Bernstein, Duke Ellington, U.B. Blake, the list goes on and on. These role models, with all their flaws and all their victories and everything that happens. So who are your role models?
Those two.
Okay, fair enough.
Those two.
Right.
Those two. Because they both believed that the music was in service of something bigger. They both did that, and they both did so much that they didn't have to do. Somebody pointed out to me that Bernstein did not have to knock himself out doing kiddie concerts. Kiddie concerts are hard to do. He had everything else he needed. He did that because he really wanted to inform and educate and nurture the next generation. And I think Ellington too, you know, there's still things we don't understand about the context of their time and the way they walked in the world, and I think they were both so brave and so committed. And I think as I discover this music, I'm finding my family, my people, you know. When you do things that are unexpected or unasked for, or somehow slightly trailblazing in music, you know you didn't make it up by yourself. And it's so wonderful to find the people who came before you, who did the big things. And Hazel Scott is such a great example. You know, she was classically trained. Again, that door wasn't open. She was this beautiful woman, and she was sort of, you know, taken over by the world of entertainment. But a first on so many levels. She was the first Black American to have her own TV show. And then she stood up for her beliefs. She, you know, refused to play in segregated venues. And she really gave up a lot for that. The piece that I'm playing is called Peace of Mind. It's one of her original tunes that I had transcribed from her 1940s recording. And I was reading her testimony for the House Un-American Activities Committee, and she used those words. She said, you know, that basically people were being corrupt and sort of jeopardizing our peace of mind as Americans. That was just a moment of goosebumps. Yeah.
Lara Downes, thank you so much for sharing your insight, your passion for music, and I cannot wait to see what your trailblazing path leads you to next.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Summertime, and the living is easy. Fish are jumping, and the cotton is high. Oh, your daddy's rich, and your mama's good looking. So hush, little baby, don't you cry. mornings you're gonna rise up singing. Then you spread your wings and you'll take the sky. But till that morning, there's nothing can harm you. With Daddy and Mama standing
I'm pleased to welcome Los Angeles-born tenor Ashley Fatolia, who sang a ravishing performance for us as we recorded our presentations for American Melting Pot. Ashley, welcome.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for having me.
You're LA-based and born. Tell us a little bit about your story.
I am. I'm an LA baby, as they say. South Bay area is where I grew up, down in Torrance. And I went to school in Orange County. I finished at Chapman University a few years back. But I've stayed local, and I've been fortunate to work with